The human fall. All people have an original mind which inclines them to pursue goodness. Yet even without our being aware of it, we are driven by evil forces to perform evil deeds which we do not want to do. In Christianity, the master of these evil forces is known as Satan. To extirpate evil by its root, and thereby end sinful history and usher in an era of goodness, we must first expose the motivation and origin of Satan and recognize the destruction he has wrought in human life. This explanation of the human fall will clarify these issues. No one has known the root of sin. Christians, on the basis of the Bible, have held to a vague belief that Adam and Eve's eating the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was the root of sin. They have thought that the fruit was that of an actual tree. But would God, the loving parent of humanity, make a fruit which could cause the fall to look so attractive? Would He place it where His children could reach it so easily? How can something one eats cause the original sin, which can be transmitted to one's descendants? Would the God of love test humans so mercilessly by a means that could cause their death? Adam and Eve would not have risked their lives and disobeyed God only to obtain some delicacy. Therefore, we can surmise that the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil could not have been an ordinary fruit. Rather, it must have been something so extraordinarily stimulating that even the fear of death did not deter them from grasping it. Many important parts of the Bible are in symbolism and metaphor. To learn what the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents, let us first investigate the tree of life, which stood next to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree of life symbolizes an ideal man who has fully realized the ideal of creation. It thus symbolizes perfected Adam. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil represents the ideal woman, perfected Eve. The Bible refers to Jesus using the metaphors of a vine and a branch. Likewise, to give us a hint about the secret of the human fall, God provided the symbolism of two trees to represent perfected Adam and Eve. In the Bible, we read that a serpent tempted Eve to commit sin. The serpent described in the Bible was able to converse with people. It caused the fall of humans who are spiritual beings. Furthermore, the serpent knew the will of God, which strictly forbade human beings to eat the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. As it is written, the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who is called the devil and Satan. He was thrown down to the earth. Revelation 12:9. It lived in heaven before it was thrown down. Even now, it can transcend time and space to dominate the human soul. This is compelling evidence that the being which the serpent symbolizes was a spiritual being. The spiritual being represented by the serpent was originally created with a good purpose, but later fell and became Satan. There are no beings endowed with such characteristics other than angels. Therefore, the serpent is an angel. From Jude 6-7, we can infer that the angel fell as a result of an illicit sexual relationship. From Genesis 3:7, we can infer that Adam and Eve's sexual parts were the instruments of their sinful deed. In John 8:44, Jesus said, "You are of your father the devil." Hence, we can deduce that the illicit sexual relationship must have occurred between the angel and human beings. The fruit signifies the love of Eve. Eve should have borne good children through her godly love. Instead, she bore evil children through her satanic love. Eve was created in an immature state. She was to reach full maturity only after going through a period of growth. Thus, it was possible for her to bear either good fruit or evil fruit through her love. Accordingly, Eve's eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil denotes that she consummated a satanic love relationship with the angel, which bound her in blood ties to him. The root of sin is that the first human ancestors had an illicit sexual relationship with an angel, symbolized by a serpent. Thus, they multiplied Satan's evil lineage. The motivation and process of the fall. Angels were created by God prior to any other creation. God created angels to be his retainers, who would assist him in creating and sustaining the universe. In Hebrew 1:14, a servant, Revelation 22:9, and ministering spirits. The Bible often portrays angels honoring and praising God. Revelation 5:11-12. Because God created us human beings as his children and gave us dominion over all creation, we are meant to rule over the angels as well. God created human beings with two components, the spirit self and the physical self. The human fall, likewise, took place in two dimensions, the spiritual and the physical. The fall which took place through the sexual relationship between the angel and Eve was the spiritual fall, while the fall which occurred through the sexual relationship between Eve and Adam was the physical fall. God assigned Lucifer to the position of archangel. However, after God created human beings as his children, he loved them many times more than he had ever loved Lucifer, whom he had created as his servant. In truth, God's love toward Lucifer did not change. It was the same before and after the creation of human beings. Yet he felt as if there had been a decrease in the love he received from God. Lucifer, feeling as though he were receiving less love than he deserved, wanted to grasp the same central position in human society as he enjoyed in the angelic world, as the channel of God's love. This was why he seduced Eve, and this was the motivation of the spiritual fall. Lucifer, who left his proper position due to his excessive desire, and Eve, who wanted to open her eyes and become like God before the time was ripe, formed a common base and began give and take action, which led them to consummate an illicit sexual relationship on the spiritual plane. Fallen Eve then seduced Adam, with the hope that by uniting with him, she could rid herself of the dread and once again stand before God. This was Eve's motivation, which led to the physical fall. Adam responded and formed a common base with Eve, standing in the position of archangel, and they began give and take action with each other. The power of the unprincipled love generated in their relationship induced Adam to abandon his original position and brought them together in an illicit physical relationship of sexual love. The power of love, the power of the principle, and God's commandment. Although God created human beings based on the principle, He governs us through love. Accordingly, in order for love to fulfill its proper role, its power must be stronger than the power of the principle. Because the power of love is stronger than the power of the principle, God foresaw that if they ever formed a common base with the archangel, there was a possibility that they could succumb to the power of deviant, unprincipled love and fall. To prevent this, God gave Adam and Eve the commandment that forbade them from relating with the archangel in this way. God also wanted them to enjoy dominion over the natural world by inheriting His creative nature. In order to inherit this creatorship, they should perfect themselves through their faith in the Word as their own portion of responsibility. God's commandment, "Do not eat of the fruit," was binding upon Adam and Eve only while they were immature. The consequences of the human fall. Satan is the name given to the archangel Lucifer after he fell. When the first human ancestors fell, they bound themselves in blood ties with Lucifer. They formed a four-position foundation yoked to Satan, and thus all humanity became the children of Satan. This is why Jesus said to the people, "You are of your father the devil," in John 4:88, and called them a brood of vipers, in Matthew 12:34 and 23:33. The Bible calls Satan the ruler of this world, in John 12:31, and the God of this world, in 2 Corinthians 4:4. Satan cannot penetrate his evil activity unless he first finds an object partner with whom he can form a common base and engage in give and take action. Satan's object partners are evil spirits in the spirit world. The object partners to these evil spirits are the spirit selves of evil people on earth, and the vehicles through which these evil spirit selves act are their physical selves. Accordingly, the power of Satan is conveyed through evil spirits and is manifested in the activities of earthly people. For example, Satan entered into Judas Iscariot, Luke 22:3, and Jesus once called Peter Satan, Matthew 16:33. In the Bible, the spirits of evil earthly men are called angels of the devil, in Matthew 25:41. Sin is a violation of heavenly law, which is committed when a person forms a common base with Satan, thus setting a condition of give and take action with him. Sin can be classified into four kinds: original sin, hereditary sin, collective sin, and individual sin. Eve inherited from the archangel all the proclivities incidental to his transgression against God when he bound her in blood ties through their sexual relationship. And Adam in turn acquired the same inclinations. These proclivities have become the root cause of the fallen inclinations in all people. They are the primary characteristics of our fallen nature. The primary characteristics of the fallen nature can be divided broadly into four types. Freedom and the human fall. Freedom requires both free will and the free actions pursuant to that will. Therefore, there cannot be any free action without free will, nor can free will be complete without free actions to accompany it. Free will is an expression of the mind. Since the mind of an original sinless person cannot operate outside of God's word, that is, the principle, it will never express free will or generate free action apart from the principle. The meaning of freedom from the viewpoint of the principle. There is no freedom outside the principle, there is no freedom without responsibility, and there is no freedom without accomplishment. Freedom could not possibly have caused human beings to fall. The reason God did not intervene in the fall. Why did the omniscient and omnipotent God not intervene to prevent the fall? In accordance with the principle of creation, God created human beings in His image, with the character and powers of the Creator, intending that they govern over all things as He governs over mankind. However, for human beings to inherit the creative nature of God, they must grow to perfection by fulfilling their portion of responsibility. Hence, while people are still in this realm, God does not directly govern them. If God were to interfere with human actions during their growing period, it would be tantamount to ignoring the human portion of responsibility. In that case, God would be disregarding His own principle of creation. If the principle were ignored, then its absoluteness and perfection would be undermined. In order to preserve the absoluteness and perfection of the principle of creation, God did not intervene in the acts that led the human beings to fall. If God were to affect the course of unprincipled beings or acts, they would necessarily be given the value of God's creations and be recognized as principled. Consequently, if God were to have intervened in the fall of the first human ancestors, He would have been attributing to those acts the value of His creations and recognizing them as principled. Then Satan would stand as the creator of all the fruits of the fall. Therefore, in order that God remain the sole creator, He did not intervene in the human fall. If God were to rule directly and control the lives of human beings who are still in a state of immaturity, this would make them unable to fulfill their own portion of responsibility, and as a result, they would fail to inherit the creative nature of God and thereby fail to gain the qualifications to rule all things. Consequently, it was in order to bless human beings as the lords of creation that God had to restrain Himself from intervening in the acts of immature human beings.